Being born in 2001 is a weird time. We can all agree on that, right? I mean...
To do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Now watch this drive.
Yeah. But hey, it meant that I got to stumble upon some of gaming's best titles at nearly the perfect time. As a person who grew up with a brother that was 10 years older than me, it definitely helped me get a head start into playing video games. I also feel like a lot of people around my age existed in the same space of taking in culturally relevant media at its peak, whether it be sports, games, books, movies, whatever. Seeing as I'm a pretty big gamer, that's kind of where most of my focus these days lands. I mean, hell, I have 3 YouTube channels, stream on Twitch 4 times a week, I keep up with at least some degree of gaming news, and I run a damn podcast dedicated to gaming happenings, if you will. But it all had to start somewhere. Also, just a fair warning, a lot of these games exist in series of sequential games, so a couple of them I will not remember which one I played. I'm solely basing it off of which images trigger a specific neuron in my brain. Which one? That one. Oof, golly, I don't even know where to start with this. This is kind of just like the game that a lot of people start with. You know, this is the game that a lot of people would consider to be like their intro into playing games. This is probably one of the most popular games ever. Actually, I don't know if that can be verifiably proven. I don't really care. Either way, this is where it all started. This is kind of where I ended up going after the fact. And then my exposure into the third game was actually much later in life. Not much later in life. It was probably like 6-7 years out at my dad's friend's house. So that was a fun time. I don't really know what I'm expected to say about these games that weren't already said probably an infinite number of times at this point. The first game is a classic. A lot of people like the third game a lot. I guess the only hot take that I have is that I liked the second game primarily because it just, I think nostalgia is the reason that kind of happened for me. I know that it's like a reskin of like another weird game that I don't even remember the name of, and if I was to actually play the second game as a child, I would probably have much worse anger issues than I do now as a result of the fact that game is fucking hard, bro. But no, instead, I was playing this game, and I was specifically playing it on the Game Boy until I eventually transitioned into playing it on... There was no transition, actually. No, I just played it on the Game Boy, and that is the last recorded memory that I have in my memory bank of playing the second game. But ultimately, I still had a good time, and clearly, it was influential enough to have its own power-up added into Super Mario Maker to function essentially like the game. So, as much as people want to crap all over the game for not being that good, I don't even know if people have that kind of opinion, but it doesn't matter. Evidently, it was still influential enough that, kind of one of the most influential Mario games of our day right now, other than Mario Odyssey, included it as a power-up, and it's actually like a pretty commonly used power-up to my knowledge, so like, put some damn respect on that game. Man, now these games, this is where I can really start to pop off, because this was technically not my first introduction into playing games, but it was probably my second. But I think it was probably more influential. I don't really know why, truthfully. A part of me thinks it has something to do with going fast. A part of me thinks it's the fact that since I was a very, very, very small child, I mean probably age 5 or 6, I've been just obsessed with like music, and this game, Sonic 2 and Sonic 3, with their banger soundtracks, just kept me hooked playing as a child. It was probably that, as well as like just the super creative and unique levels that they would put you through in those games. Because a lot of people want to make jokes of like, oh, the new Sonic games, they only take you through land and sea and sand and lava and whatever the hell. Nah, these games, absolutely fire. Stages, bangers. Music for those stages, bangers. Controls, bangers. The animations, bangers. The sound design just of like everything, bangers. All around, just some of the most like core memory shaping experiences I've probably ever had with a video game or a video game franchise. And just like as a quick side note, when I was really little, I also had like that weird, like a Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles attachable cartridge. So you could like put it into your Genesis, and then you would put another like Sega Sonic game, Sonic 1 or 2, or maybe the third game as well in there. And then you could play as Knuckles in Sonic 2. and that was kind of the most batshit thing I had ever seen as like a however year old child I was. So yeah, I have very strong feelings about this game, especially compared to the first 3 Mario games, but that's not to throw shade on those games, because I also have very, very good memories attached to those games. This is another game that I hold very fondly within my heart, even if it doesn't elicit as strong of emotions as Sonic 2, Sonic 3, or probably even the Mario Brothers games, to be honest with you. But there's one thing I can say about this game, which is that the Animaniacs game for the Sega Genesis has a soundtrack that me as a grown-ass adult will still go back to and listen to. I mean, hell, actually, the day that I'm recording this footage, this recording, overdub or whatever the hell you want to call it, when I was at work just a few hours prior, I was listening to somebody long play this game just so I could hear the soundtrack while I was working. You can call that obsessive if you want, I don't really care. The soundtrack for this game is what kept me going. The storyline, I don't remember what was happening until I actually went back and watched people play it and then figured out the story. But that said, it's about the music, it's about the setting, and it's honestly just about the general concept of, like, these characters are just going to basically steal props to just open their own museum, and I think that's pretty funny. And also just like the Animaniacs is just such a widely beloved series. If you go to HBO or Hulu or some equivalent, you can watch all of the old versions of the cartoon, which are, I mean, man, they're like pretty dated because they are from the 90s, but I still think they're pretty silly. They kind of give me like Homer Simpson, not Homer Simpson, why him specifically? They give me Simpsons vibes in a way that I really, really love, and it makes me happy, and that's kind of the biggest point. I'm cutting in partway through here because there's exactly one game that I could think of, and this is coming a day after I recorded the original thing. Pac-Man 2: A New Adventure, also probably one of the more deep-cut games that I've ever played. The basic principle was that you would walk around as Pac-Man trying to do various deeds for your family, like getting your daughter milk, helping your, like, neighbor move a couch, getting flowers for your daughter or something. I don't remember all the specifics of it. All I remember is the game was like a weird point and click game where you would fire pellets at things to try and get Pac-Man to go places, and he was probably the most emotionally unstable character I've ever seen in a video game. Probably the most emotionally exaggerative character I've ever seen, ever, even in real life. And I've seen some very crazy motherfuckers, and nobody can top this motherfucker on the crazy scale. So shouts out to Pac-Man for making some banger games. This one maybe not necessarily one of them, and I'm okay with that. All right, time for me to throw my first curveball at you because what the fuck is this game? Sylvester Stallone in Cliffhanger for the Sega Genesis. I have vivid enough memories to remember the name of this game, what it looked like, and kind of what it sounded like, but that is about as far as it goes. I am just a little bit McFlabbergasted at the whole concept that they put Sylvester Stallone in a Sega Genesis game because, I mean, if I look this up right now, the time period in which this game was probably made is just like bananas. Like, it doesn't really make... When did this game come out? I'm trying to Google it. Oh, I didn't even look up the release date. That would explain what happened. 1993. What an interesting game. Shouts out to Sylvester Stallone in Cliffhanger. Probably, I mean, I think it might be one of, if not the most deep cut game that I will ever have on any gaming list ever. And this is obviously no exception to that. Here's where I go back into my regular Uncharted territory a little bit. Sonic Spinball was also a game that I had pretty fond memories of, again, for the music. The crazy thing about Sonic Spinball is it's also one of those games, like, I was not a great gamer as a child. Like, I wasn't very good at these games, but that said, Sonic Spinball was one of those games that, like, I could not beat the first stage. No, that's not true. I beat the first stage, and I may have been able to beat the second stage. I really don't know. This game is just crazy because some crazy bastard at Sega was like, hey, so what if we took Sonic, put him in a pinball machine, but that pinball machine was an arcade, and somehow the producer team or whatever team they would have had at the time signed off on that and was like, yeah, this makes sense, because it doesn't, but Man, my God. There's one thing that Sonic games will always be able to get down, no matter how crazy their ideas are, which is their soundtrack. Because the soundtrack for that game, once again, kind of bitchin', you know? All right, let me move on from that. When I was in elementary school still, I had a slide phone. I would text my brother at recess sometimes asking if we could play games when I got home, because that's just the person I am, I guess. At that point, I was old enough to walk there to school and back, so I was old enough to have a phone, so I don't want to hear any of you motherfuckers coming after me. He was probably 16 at the time when he first introduced me to games, which I know kind of does not fall in line with what I said earlier, but it's a rough timeline. I don't remember a whole lot around that time. I feel like he must have been a bit more mature at that time, because some of the games that he was playing were pretty reflective of that. Like, I love you, man, if you hear this somehow, but I think you are kind of why I am who I am today. Let me just start off this section by saying I don't watch wrestling. I don't consume wrestling media. I have one friend, maybe two, who consume wrestling media, and I don't play wrestling games. So you might be wondering, why is SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 on my list? Well, it should have been made pretty apparent by the top that this was mostly my brother's game, because he enjoyed playing that game, and you could make characters, make stage entrances, make different moves and things. And that was the way that me and him really bonded when we were younger, is just mercilessly beating the hell out of each other in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008. But outside of that, my one exact core memory with this game is me and my good buddy Trey, when he used to live here, is we would do something that we would just call the evasive roll, in that tone of voice almost exactly, because if I'm not mistaken, Rey Mysterio, who most people know who that is, he had a move where he would just roll amongst the best of them, and so that's kind of the one thing that I remember from that game. But shouts out to wrestling games for making a lot of people happy, I guess. Now, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This is a game that I didn't actually play. I mostly watched my brother play it, and that was because it was a puzzle game and I was stupid. But I did get to watch him play it on his N64, and that was a fun time. Matter of fact, I have such a strong sense memory for remembering exactly how his room was set up when he used to do this, because, again, he was probably 16 or 17 when this would happen, and he actually was doing all of this in the same room that I'm currently recording this episode in, so shouts out to him. So I don't have a ton of strong memories with this one. My strongest memory actually was the fact that the N64 was green and the plastic was see-through, and if I'm not mistaken, the controller was also the same. If not, it was the default gray controller with the yellow C-stick. So shouts out the N64 for also making a lot of people happy. Okay, this is where we get into a little bit of Uncharted territory, because I don't exactly know the specifics on this one. So there was a motocross game that me and my brother played a lot back in the day, and really all it was kind of just you driving around and just, well, I'm sure there was more to it, but my memories with it were just kind of driving around these open areas, just kind of doing tricks, going off ramps, just doing some silly stuff. However, a thing that I strongly remember from playing this game, and you may have even potentially seen this, because this is kind of floating around the internet sometimes, is if you drove too far out of bounds, the game would actually kick you back into bounds, but they would kick you off your motorcycle. And so that was pretty hilarious at the time. And that was actually the first game that introduced me to the concept of biffing something, which is essentially just doing something and just screwing it up majorly and unrepairably so. So I don't know if it was Motocross Madness. I just remember it was a game that was Motocross Madness-esque, and I was playing it in, I want to say 2006 or 7. So do with that information what you will. Shouts out. This game, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, is kind of why I had to warn you guys that there are some games that are in a series of sequential games that I don't remember which one it is, because again, you have to understand that I was probably at absolute most the age of 10 when I was playing these games. However, when I look up Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 1, it definitely strikes some specific neurons in my brain that tells me, yeah, this is probably the right game. And really what it actually is it's mostly just that the other games that came ahead of it are way too high fidelity looking, that I was like, there's no way that I was playing these games because they had come out way too like late, if you will. I also just remember my brother owned his own apartment at this point, or he didn't own an apartment. You know what I mean? Shut the hell up. And I would go over there and I'd play the game with him. The funny thing is that, I would kind of describe this as basically being Diablo before Diablo. And two, for the first time in a little while, I had to text my brother and being like, hey, so there was a top-down dungeon crawler-esque game that we played when I was younger, and I don't remember what it was. And a part of me was thinking it was probably Baldur's Gate, and then he texted me back and he goes, yeah, I think it was Baldur's Gate. And I was like, damn, I'm good. Me and him just have that kind of connection. That's crazy. And then he had like come over a couple of days ago to drop off his nephew, and he was like, so how's that video coming along? And I was like, oh yeah, see, funny thing, I haven't started on that yet. However, and then I kind of talked to him being like, yeah, no, I do remember this game, and I looked it up and I was like, this looks pretty familiar. So every other game that's on this list are games that I do remember from sense memory. So that was a good time. All right. The Sims 2 or maybe The Sims 3, whichever one it was, I don't really remember. This, I feel like this shouldn't count very much because I think this is the game that I was the least involved in. No, let me think. I was less involved with Legend of Zelda, but this game, I really truly think all I did was watch my brother play the game. But I think that's because The Sims is a game that is pretty easy to play, but was still a little too complicated for like 7-year-old me to understand. And you know, hold on, actually, I can figure out which one it was just by Googling it. Hold on, place a pin on this point. All right, so I did some Googling. It was definitely The Sims 2 because The Sims 3 didn't come out until 2009, just so we're aware. So yeah, Sims 2, fun times, even though I didn't really do anything. But it was fun to see how he would kind of mess with The Sims and occasionally make a good house. He could be a good architect if he applied himself properly. No, I'm just kidding. He's happy doing his own thing. I'm not going to try and force him to become an architect. He's like 32, for God's sake. I can't exactly pinpoint when this side plot began, but at some point I remember going to a family friend's house and playing games that I had absolutely no business playing as a young child. Part of it was because they were far too inappropriate. That was kind of a big chunk of it, but the other half of it was because I was just bad, and those games were hard. Starting off this list, Prince of Persia. This is a game that I don't have a ton of sense memory of actually playing. That said, I do remember it. Mainly because I remember there's like a section where you have to like stop time or something and then jump across a pit or something. I don't remember all the specifics of it. All I remember is that game was too difficult for me being like 10 or however old I might have been. I was probably like 10, somewhere between the ages of 10 and 12. Yeah, we'll go with that. Next, and in the completely opposite direction, is God of War 2. Again, I can't confirm exactly which one it was because I just don't exactly remember which one it was, because honestly, God of War 1 through 3, they look similar enough when you are as young as I was and stupid, but I think it's pretty obvious to tell based on the train of thought that this video has been taking that I should not have been playing those games. I really just shouldn't have. I just did some excess Googling. It's not excessive. It's just like regular amounts of Googling. Found out it could have either been 1 or 2 because one came out in like 2004 or 2005 and the second one came out in 2007. So it's very possible it could have been either one of those. I don't really remember. But if we wanted to get into some deep cut stuff, that was when I first figured out what a titty was. So that was interesting. I'll keep it at that. This one doesn't really count. This is more of a side tangent. I remember playing GTA 5 when it was first released back in 2013, so I was 12 when this was happening, and I had to convince my parents that it wasn't all guns, drugs, and sex. That said, I can fully recognize now, looking back at it, that it was still way too inappropriate for me to be playing, but I was playing God of War before I had hit the age of 12, so like, I think I'll be fine. Simpsons Hit and Run, kind of like a GTA 5, but like softer and in the Simpsons universe. This one, honestly, I think I could probably have gotten away with when I was younger. Let me actually, hold on. Let me. There's a lot of Googling I'm doing while I'm in the middle of recording because this isn't prepped very much anymore. Okay, it was only rated T for teens, so I might have technically, objectively been a little too young for it, but like, not like it would have really made that big of a difference. But that was one of the first games where I finally realized the strife that I would have to go through to play a game that was exclusive to a few consoles that I did not have. It was because the game came out for like PC, Xbox, PlayStation. Let me think. PC, maybe the original Xbox or the Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, I believe, and the GameCube. And I had a Nintendo Wii. And so you can see where the problems kind of arose there. And to finish off this list with one that I was just bad at when I was playing it, Guitar Hero 2 or 3. Again, I don't remember which one. All I know is that rhythm is hard and playing the guitar is hard. And I think maybe if I had done better at playing Guitar Hero when I was younger, maybe I could actually play the guitar today. Instead, I'm just relegated to making beats that require no actual mechanical skill required to play an instrument. Or so some people have told me. Fuck you guys. Anyways, moving back onto the regular plot now, then my brother moved out, and I started heavily getting into computer games, although the absolute oldest I would have been when I first played my first computer game was probably 9. That said, the first computer games that I played actually probably preceded some of the points that I made above. Again, the timelines kind of overlap a little bit about, being old enough to walk to school, because if I was young enough to be at a daycare, I was definitely not old enough to be walking to school, and I can verifiably prove that. Starting off this list strong, but albeit very not specific, there were a ton, and I mean a ton, of browser games on Y8 Games. Any people who are around my age probably know what I'm talking about if you grew up in just a privileged enough area to be able to access a computer with internet. Funnily enough, some of those games actually got banned at the daycare that I attended. Some crash test dummy game, because this... yeah, not great when you are, in the 4th grade, probably. There was a lot of games that I played on that website that were canon related for some reason. I think that was where my obsession with going fast came from, but that seems like a very violent way to go fast, but whatever. Playing Learn to Fly, the game with the penguin and the paraglider, that's a fun time. The weird bartender game where you'd mix drinks and the guy would just explode all the time, that was a fun time. And Minesweeper. No, I didn't know how to play Minesweeper, and as a matter of fact, I actually didn't know how to play Minesweeper until I was probably 19. So, that's a fun time. And Space Pinball, which is pretty, generic Windows-specific game. That was a lot of fun playing. Then if we get into actual lists of more specific games that I can vividly remember the details of and the names of, there's a lot of good ones. There's Plants vs. Zombies, classic game of the year back in, 2009 or whenever the hell the game came out. Still holding strong to this day, although the Garden Warfare series they've made is seemingly not doing very well. That doesn't really matter. I played this game a ton on the computer. I remember I would go to, what would happen? I remember I'd go swimming. I'd come back, I'd be hella sunburnt because I'm probably, one of the whitest people imaginable, and I'd get some aloe vera spray sprayed on my neck. I'd have a cool towel placed over it once it dried to make sure that I wasn't just wiping it off, and then I would just kind of sit at the laptop in the kitchen playing Plants vs. Zombies. And then eventually, once I got a little bit older and had access to my first smartphone, I would play Plants vs. Zombies there, and that was probably the first game that me and my mom ever obsessed over and bonded over like that, so that was a fun time. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the intensity that is Wizard 101, which, man, the intro to that game, the way that you go about creating your character, the music, the mini games, the spells. I remember having an obsession with the different creatures you could spawn in Wizard 101 when I was in a daycare that I used to go to, that when we'd go on field trips, I would just daydream casting those spells in my head, because that's just the type of child that I was at the time. That's kind of even how I am as an adult, I'm not gonna lie to you. That said, when I tried to go back and play it kind of recently, I officially realized that, damn, this game locks you behind a lot of paywalls. So as much as I'd love to keep going back and playing that game, I make my own money, I work a salary job, but I'm not doing that. Peace and love to all of you who are, but that's not me. Ooh, another one that I actually had to recently put into this list because my friend brought it up to me, and I even made a whole YouTube video on this on my other channel, Toontown. That game got revamped a few years ago, and I'll still go back and play it sometimes with my friends because it's funny. But that game was just a delight to play. I think a lot of this came down to the music again. The gameplay was fun, walking around was fun. The being able to create a character was fun. Just seeing the very vivid, bright, colorful areas, the funnily named places you could go to, all that stuff. That was a fun time. But the thing that always sticks with me is that fucking music. It is like music theory. If you're talking about music theory, it's like the simplest thing known to man, and it's like not very good if you were to objectively look at it. I don't care. It's a child's game. Although nowadays it is kind of becoming like a weird place for like furry people to do their thing. I don't know if that's true, and that might be slanderous, and if it is, I'm truly sorry. Another game that kind of came out of the recesses of my brain was Monkey Quest. It was a 2D game where you'd be traveling in like a little kind of 2D jungle area as like your own custom-made monkey fighting off enemies. This is where I learned about the deleterious effects of the internet on a small child. Turns out being called a monkey back then somehow hurt less than it does now. Bloons games. Bloons games really popped off for me, I feel like, around this era. I would say probably, hold on, how old was I in the 6th grade? 11, 12 maybe? That was probably when those games popped off for me. Bloons Tower Defense 4 was a game that I played a ton of because it was just a fun freaking time. And then there was another one, it was called like Super Monkey or something, where you'd kind of just fly around in like an auto-scrolling type level as a super monkey. And you could pick up power-ups to make your arrows or your darts more powerful, and you had to try and clear out enough balloons in an area, and if you didn't, you would fail. That was a fun time. Fun story about that, actually. I broke my wrist probably an hour beforehand at school because of things. I had to walk 1.5 miles back home with a broken wrist because my friend was being a dick. Still love you, though. I sat down, played that game for a little bit. My dad got off the phone. He kind of was just like, why does your wrist look like that? And then I realized that I had broken my wrist there. And so that's, I have positive memories associated with that game because it kept me calm during a time where my body was probably experiencing at least some degree of serious trauma. So shouts out Funny Monkey Games. There's a little bit more overlap here because right after my brother had left, I started playing computer games, but then after that happened, the DS Lite became super popular, and my parents were very gracious and actually bought me one, which has given me what I would probably classify as like the second most amount of unbridled joy of any era on this list, which is why I actually still go back and play these games sometimes, because I still have a couple of them. The poster child for the Nintendo DS games, in my opinion, from my perspective, is Super Mario 64 DS. I know I'm going to sound like a heathen to all of the Super Mario 64 purists. It's a great game. I like playing it. It's a fun time. I like watching speedruns of it. I like watching mods of it. It's just a good freaking time. I watched a lot of SMG4 animations of the game back in the day, but this isn't about that. Super Mario 64 DS was where I initially got kind of looped into that game franchise. And as much as people like the original more than the DS version, I think the DS version did a lot of things sort of better than the original in that, like, well, okay, this is coming from my perspective where, because I know there's a whole thing of like, you're playing in a 3D environment and the DS only has like a regular D-pad which takes you in 4, maybe 8 directions, and I understand that, but like the extra characters you could get, the extra, places you could go, the ways you had to unlock the characters, the way that the story changed a little bit was a fun time. And the only vendetta that I have with that game is that it presented me with the very first jump scare I had ever experienced in real life, because I was just watching videos on the game, because that's just how my life is. If I like a game, I get obsessed with it. I watch a lot of media on it, and I found a video called How to Unlock Waluigi in Mario 64 DS and then got jump scared to shit, and my life has not been the same since. But other than that, it was a pretty good time. This is taking kind of a weird turn here. Sonic Rush, probably one of the best Sonic DS games specifically. Granted, I think there was only 2, which was like Sonic Rush and then the game that came after Sonic Rush. And Sonic Rush is just better. You can fight me on it. I haven't even played the second game, but just from what I've seen, it's just better. Sonic Rush is just, it's more satisfying. You got to play as Blaze for the first time, which was a pretty cool time. The game being 2D, it still felt pretty good. I think it was one of the first games to actually include the dash mechanic, which is obviously kind of a staple to Sonic games. Literally every single one that's come out after it, essentially, except for, no, I was going to say Sonic 06, but that game came out before Sonic Rush, I think. I don't know my timeline very well. Either way, it was a fun time, and the music gets stuck in my head sometimes, but it's not one of those games that I just like go back and listen to the music for, because it just doesn't scratch the itch like that. But it's not to say it wasn't good. It was still very good. Now, this is where people are going to come at my throat a little bit. Sonic Dark Brotherhood. I can acknowledge it was not a good game. And ultimately, I would probably have to agree with you because it's I didn't get that far in the game. I watched the story, I understood how to play the game, and then there was this weird spider boss that scared me as a small child, and so I never beat it. But either way, I still have a core memory of actually playing the game, and it is still kind of one of the games that I think of when I think Nintendo DS games that I played as a child. So it's going on this list. I don't care. But now we're getting into some more bangers. Kirby Superstar Ultra. This is where I'll definitively say that the DS remake of this game was so much better than the original. This time I have played both, quite a lot actually, and I can definitively say that Superstar Ultra for the DS is just better. The colors are better. The sound is, I guess, not as good because you're playing it on a smaller console, but either way, the colors were better, the controls were better. It felt like the enemy AI was better as well. There was actually a video I watched a while ago on the original game where this guy's like, I don't know how to describe it, but I feel like an enemy just shows up out of nowhere all the time, and I always get hit, and I end up dying a lot for no reason. And I kind of felt that too when I played the original. So then I got to play the game on the DS again after not touching it for a few years, and I remember just how freaking fun the game is. Matter of fact, I think if I found my 3DS, I think Kirby Superstar Ultra is actually still in the cartridge, or in the thing. So like that goes to show that it was probably the last Nintendo DS game that I played, and for good freaking reason. Mario Kart DS. Now this has an interesting history because this was actually my very first time getting into what I can kind of colloquially describe as modding of a video game. It wasn't like true modding, but I got an action replay at the time. And I don't know how this happens, but whenever I want to do something mildly cheating with my games, especially back then, I would always find a way to break them. Somehow my action replay just stopped working when I would play Mario Kart DS. I tried homebrewing my Nintendo Wii in the year 2019 or whatever, and I somehow bricked my fucking SD card. So you know, maybe this kind of lifestyle isn't cut out for me. But that said, Mario Kart DS was my first introduction into that, and when my action replay was working, it was a fun time to just kind of abuse the CPU because I was going on a power trip, I guess. I don't really know. And then the last game, and this is another interesting case, Mario Party DS, right? And so here's the thing. This is the first game that after I was no longer able to play it on my DS, I actually found an emulator on my phone that I used to play the game. And it doesn't translate perfectly because you're dealing with a 2-screen system on a 1-screen device, aka your phone. But that didn't stop me from trying because Mario Party DS gives me, I think Mario Party DS might give me the best memories of any Mario Party game that I've ever played. But I think the reason for that is because the only Mario Party games that I've really played on a consistent basis were Mario Party DS, Mario Party, whatever the one is for the Wii, and whatever Mario Party is for the Switch. And I don't even remember what they're called. Mario Party DS is easy to remember because it was a Mario Party game on, you guessed it, the Nintendo DS. And then my DS got stolen at a public pool. And I know what you're thinking. Why did you bring your DS to a public pool? I don't really know, man. I mean, I was the kid who used to play my DS on my walk home from school, which I guess is pretty indicative that I had a bit of an addiction, but hey, that's for my therapist to figure out. If I had... Anyways, jokes aside, this is the era that I look back on the most fondly. Most of it's probably just due to my most recent exposure with these. It's kind of the most recent memories in my adolescent gaming memory, but my goodness, I had some of the most enjoyable experiences with these games before I started getting competitive and developing some kind of anger issues, and before I developed an attitude. The games just felt great to play. Like, young me was dumb and didn't understand how motion controls could be bad on Nintendo Wii games, and older me thinks we may have been a little bit too harsh on them. The soundtracks for these games are probably some of the best I've ever heard, and there's a reason the Wii sold over 100 million units, and I can brag that I contributed 3 to that list. Poster child of the Nintendo Wii games for me, Super Smash Bros. Brawl. I remember playing this game so much that I was like, I'm the shit because I can beat level 9 CPUs. What it really was I could beat level 9 CPUs, but then I could also just beat my friends who, you know, were also like between the ages of 12 and I don't know, 15 maybe, who knows. But this is kind of just now an episode talking about my strongest memories with these games. My strongest memories with these games were playing Super Smash Bros. Brawl Subspace Emissary when my family was over for Thanksgiving and I was playing it in the living room, and that was a fun time. And then on top of that, I would go over to my friend's house who, I mean, he's literally like a 5-minute walk away from me. I'd go over to his house and me and him would play, and we really would do the Fox mirror on Final Destination, no items, and that was pretty funny. But then sometimes he would play his main and I would play my main, which was Mario, and he would try and throw shit at me and I would reflect it back and I'd kill him, and it was pretty funny. So shouts out Super Smash Bros. Brawl. That I feel like people still consider this the worst of all the Smash games, but this was my introduction into it, and so I don't care. Sonic Unleashed gives me some weird feelings because on one hand they turned Sonic into another kind of conglomeration of furry something or others. On the other hand, I remember getting the ads for this game back in the day where the guy who was playing it was playing with the nunchuck and he like became a werewolf or something. It was really weird. Surprisingly, I've played Sonic Unleashed for the Wii and for the Xbox 360, and I have a stronger nostalgic feeling for Sonic Unleashed for the Wii for some reason. I think the level design was just something that I was more used to as a child, and so going back and trying to play the 360 version multiple years later was kind of a jarring switch for me. But that said, they also did some pretty good voice acting work. I liked the characters, I liked the stages, I liked going for all the things, and I wasn't against the Werehog as much as, I swear to God everyone else was, but that might have been because I might have not been able to look at how good or bad a Sonic game objectively was at that age. I don't know. These are actually probably like the statistical staple of the Nintendo Wii, which was Wii Play, Wii Fit, and Wii Sports plus Wii Sports Resort. I'm kind of just grouping them all into one because that's, they're not all the same game, but for my money, I'm going to group them up. Wii Play was easily the least physically active of all of them because, you could like play pool, you could play like tanks, you could play like this weird neon table table hockey version of Pong. It was pretty weird. Wii Fit with the balance board. I had a pretty good time doing this. Like they had like a thing where you had to run in a straight line, but you had to make sure to stop on time and make sure you didn't fall off while you're doing various like tightrope adjacent things, and that was a fun time. Wii Sports, man, Wii Sports is, I think, probably the most iconic Wii game ever. Is that? I don't know if that's a controversial statement for me to say. It doesn't really matter to me, but that was a fun time. And then Wii Sports Resort also gave me a strong sense of like a weirdly strong sense of nostalgia. I think it's because there was like a delay between Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort, so I was like a little bit older to be able to like actually comprehend what was going on with Wii Sports Resort, and so that was kind of what triggered that sense memory in my head stronger than Wii Sports. But for all four of these games, I think Wii Play probably gives me the strongest sense memory, and I don't know why. Whew, now we can get into some real bangers of games, because Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, my goodness, probably some of the most fun I've ever had playing a game ever, honestly. I remember going to my dad's friend's house, who I've mentioned once before, and playing Mario Galaxy 1. It wasn't for the first time there, but it was just like, that was a weird sense memory that I had of playing that game. But man, the game, like Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, I think were the games that really introduced me to like how beautiful music can sound. And I keep bringing up music a lot because, again, that's kind of just the realm that I also operate in. The soundtrack for those games was freaking phenomenal, to the point where for a little while I was actually using the really soft and calm Mario Galaxy music as like a means of helping me fall asleep. It's not like I needed it. It was kind of just like a thing to help. Just to make it a little easier. But man, when you picked up that power up in Rosalina's, whatever the hell she calls it, in the first game, and then you had like infinite flight for like a minute, that was a fun time. Seeing all the new power ups from the second game, where you could turn Yoshi into a freaking balloon or like a very fast little guy. Such a good time. Bee Mario, hell yeah. Spring Mario, hell yeah. Ice Flower Mario, best freaking thing ever. But Yeah, dude, Black Cap Mario, Infinite Flying, and Rosalina's Observatory. Observatory is the word that it's called. Such a good freaking time. This is gonna take kind of a weird turn. Naruto Clash of Ninja Revolution. I'm not like a big Naruto person. I just have a lot of friends who are. Shouts out to my good buddy Trey again. He actually introduced me to this series of games. And if I'm not mistaken, Naruto Clash of Ninja Revolution was probably the first, or it was a game that came out, probably right before it. And the interesting thing about this game is that if you wanted to do like your ultimate jutsus and shit, you would have to like physically shake the Wii remote and the nunchuck. And I would always do that really fast because I have severe ADHD, and it would make things a lot easier to do the whole thing and then turn around and pretend like I was badass, even though I wasn't, because all I was doing was shaking a Wiimote and a nunchuck. Now that I'm actually looking at these images, I'm pretty sure it was actually Clash of Ninja Revolution 2, so hopefully I can remember that in the edit. And the only reason I know that is because the cover art for the game strikes specific neurons in my brain that make it tingle, and so I am like 90% certain that it was actually the second one and not the third, so do not cancel me for that, please. Another game, this is actually a game that I could have technically put on the list of games that I played with my brother, but I didn't. Donkey Kong Country Returns. This was also my first introduction into a Donkey Kong game, which was with the Returns series, and my goodness, those games are freaking fantastic. But this was actually one of the few games, this is probably the only game at the time that I was able to completely, fully beat. No, there was a couple games that I beat. That's a total fucking lie. But this was the game that I actually fully 100%ed with my brother, which is interesting. I was being a completionist at the age of, what, 13? I don't even know. Because there was, so in every single level, there was like the Kong letters that you could pick up. And then there was something else that you could pick up. I don't remember. But if you picked up all of them, then... if you picked up every single one in every single level, then you would unlock these like harder stages that you would also try and 100% to complete, and then you'd like you wouldn't really get anything except for the satisfaction of knowing that you 100%ed the game. So that was a fun time. And the last game on this freaking list is probably one of the only, well, no, sorry, it's the only game that I have a sense memory for that I bought off of the Nintendo eShop, or whatever they called it in Nintendo Wii terms. Sonic the Hedgehog 4. This is also not a good game. What this was them trying to basically take Sonic 1 and 2, modernize it, and then add some new things to it. I mean, literally the final boss is like kind of the same. There's still some music from the game that I hold fondly to this day, but I can recognize that it was not a good game. I just really enjoyed it as a kid, and I would probably still enjoy it now as an adult if I had access to the game, but again, I sold my Wii because I'm dumb. But the biggest reason I had to put this on the list was because it was the only game that I fondly remember that I got from the Nintendo eShop, and so I think it's important just on that basis alone. Alright, well, after 41.5 minutes, I think that was everything. I'm not gonna lie to you, by the time I started recording this and by the time you see the final project, there's probably a handful more games that I forgot about until I started reaching into the deep recesses of my mind. Although don't go too far, you might pull out some underlying trauma that you didn't know you had. That said, there are also definitely a lot that I know of, but I can't even begin to think of how to describe them or their names because they are that cloudy. They're actually hiding behind the underlying trauma that I did know that I had. Either way, I kind of want to know what games you guys played when you were younger, because obviously you didn't have to start as young as I did, because I was probably like 5. Who knows? Maybe I can spot some generational gaps. I know for a fact that there's a ton of games that I left out that people are going to have some kind of contention with, but I feel like I sort of existed within a niche part of playing games, and that still hasn't changed even to this day.
Hold on, I'm gonna 360 no scope these bitches.
He's gonna no scope the
Ready?
fucking enemies.
Don't you wish it?
Did it work?
No.
I roll a reasonable amount of fear. Get him!
What the fuck?
Yes!
Okay, Dylan, are you clipping through the floor?
You get off the front of that truck, young man.
It's my truck.
My bad,
My
Pimp, I'm
truck.
sorry. It was a joke. Ah! No, I got stuck on
My
the ice
truck.
cream truck.
Did you die?